Dr. Anurag Shrimal, Senior Consultant and Lead Pediatric Liver Transplant Surgeon at Global Hospital, Mumbai. I would like to invite the chairpersons for the session, Dr. Sushil Bhatia and Professor Himanshu Pandey.
So maybe invite now Dr. Anurag Shrimal from Mumbai, KT in presence of CLD, which and when. Dr. Anurag, please.
Good afternoon, all of you. And first of all, my thanks to the entire committee for inviting me for this talk. Now this is a very, very interesting topic. So which is about kidney transplant in the presence of chronic liver disease. When a kidney transplant alone will suffice, or when would the patient need a kidney and a liver transplant both? Now to understand that cirrhosis itself, it leads to multiple alteration or a unique pathophysiological alterations in the body. There is synthetic dysfunction, protein synthetic dysfunction, there is malnutrition with sarcopenia, and hence it leads to impaired wound healing. Presence of portal hypertension, and hence an abdominal or a retroperitoneal collateralization could lead to a high risk of bleeding. There is disruption of the primary and the secondary hemostatic mechanisms. There is renal dysfunction, as well as there may be impaired drug metabolism, renal as well as hepatic. And hence the outcomes of any surgery could be very different in a patient who has underlying chronic liver disease as compared to a same surgery without patients with chronic liver disease. So I thought of first kind of bringing it up as to how do we stratify the surgical risk in a patient with cirrhosis. Now it depends on the degree of liver dysfunction, age, other comorbidities, type of surgical procedure, as well as the expertise of the team. Now certain objective parameters which are used is the CTP score, wherein the 5 parameters, encephalopathy, ascites, albumin, bilirubin, and INR, each of them is given a point of 1, 2, and 3. The MELD score, which is inclusive of bilirubin, INR, and creatinine, which is a logarithmic score. And when it comes to surgery, the ASA classification, which is from class 1 to class 6. Now, these are the various individual scores which have been used to predict the outcomes. But a composite score, which includes the age, the MELD score, the ASA, and which is available freely online on this link, is the Mayo Postoperative Surgical Risk Score. And it predicts the surgical risk in a patient with cirrhosis very well. So I have kind of gotten the screenshots with 2 case scenarios here. So this score includes the age. So I have usual age for kidney transplants around 50-year-old. Considering we are thinking of a diabetic, hypertensive, and a NASH as the underlying cause of liver disease. Now you can see that for compensated cirrhosis, which is that they've had no episode of decompensation in the form of jaundice, ascites, encephalopathy. So the ASA score is 3. I have given a score of a bilirubin of normal 1 and a creatinine of 4 and an INR of 1. Now this creatinine value of 4 I have chosen from the MELD score, that whenever a patient is on dialysis, the peak creatinine which could be given in the score would be 4. And if you look at this lower part of the screen, there in the first case scenario, the 30 days mortality is to the tune of around 10%, and the 90-day mortality is to the tune of around 15%. Okay. Now I have kept all the parameters same, but have just changed it to a decompensated cirrhosis. Okay. And you see that the 30-day mortality increases to nearly 20%, and the 90-day mortality increases to nearly 30%, and the 1-year mortality increases to 42%. So this risk assessment clearly tells us that kidney transplant in a patient with cirrhosis could be a high-risk procedure, and we need to select the patient very, very carefully as to who would benefit from a kidney alone or who would need a kidney and a liver transplant simultaneously. So now understanding the pathophysiology and as to where do we, how the liver disease progresses. Now, Cirrhosis by its inherent nature is a progressive disease. So from chronic liver disease to compensated cirrhosis, to decompensated cirrhosis, wherein the patient might have any of these issues, which is variceal hemorrhage, ascites, jaundice, encephalopathy, and further decompensation. Now, what has been found is that the HVPG correlates very, very well in this understanding as to where we stand or where the patient stands in his disease process at this point of time. So in this group of patient, which is up to compensated cirrhosis, the HVPG would be less than 10. Once this HVPG starts increasing more than 10, there is hyperdynamic circulation. These patients either would have decompensated or would be in the process to decompensate very, very soon. Okay, so this is one of the very, very important markers, which I'll discuss further about the use in assessment of these patients. Now coming to the three the two situations wherein the patients would have both these diseases. So first situation is that these are the patients with end-stage renal disease and have liver disease. So wherein the kidney disease predominate and the liver, the kidney is pulling a liver if at all it is needed. Now these patients could be end-stage liver disease with cirrhosis or end-stage renal disease with hyperoxaluria, and then the polycystic kidney and liver disease. The patients with end-stage liver disease, so, which is predominantly cirrhosis and liver failure, and now they have developed a kidney failure, and these are the patients who could be either having a chronic kidney disease or acute kidney injury. So essentially, it brings out to our three sets of patients, which is end-stage renal disease with cirrhosis, or end-stage liver disease with chronic kidney disease, or end-stage liver disease with acute kidney injury, and I'll briefly talk about the three situations. So in patients with chronic kidney disease and have CLD, we need to identify who are the patients who do not have portal hypertension. So whether it is from their history and examination, where there has been any history of decompensation, so they are ruled out. If there are on a CT or an ultrasound, there are various abdominal collateral zone imaging, that is a direct indicator that the HVPG is going to be more than 10. There should be no esophageal varices on endoscopy. Esophageal varices starts to develop at a HVPG of 10 and tend to have a bleed at an HVPG of 12. Platelet counts less than a lakh, again a warning sign that this is not the right candidate. Now with the advent of MRE, the hepatic transient elastography can be done. A score more than 223 kPa would be indicative that there is fibrosis. The gold standard of assessment still remains an HVPG, that an HVPG of less than 10 is indicative that there is no significant portal hypertension, and these patients could be selected for a kidney transplant alone. Okay. So in short, that patients with end-stage renal disease and liver disease where the kidney disease predominates, if their HVPG is less than 10, they can go for a kidney transplant alone safely. If the HVPG is more than 10, then a simultaneous liver and a kidney transplant would benefit them. Now coming to the second part of it, of the discussion, which is the patients with end-stage liver disease, which is cirrhosis with liver failure, and now have developed renal insufficiency. Now this can again be divided, this group could be divided into two, which is patients with chronic kidney disease and the patients who have developed acute kidney injury. Now there has been a new definitions of acute kidney injury by the International Ascites Club, and because the creatinine itself is a very, very poor marker, you can see that an increase in creatinine by just 0.3 milligram per deciliter is a marker of kidney injury, and it could be graded as stage 1, 2, and 3. Okay. Now, there have been various criteria for simultaneous liver and kidney transplantation and their evolution. So, in 2006, Davis came up. Now, again, as I discussed, that we have these two group of patients, which is liver disease or liver failure with chronic kidney disease and with acute kidney injury. So, in this group of patients, you can see that the criteria have been quite uniform, that if the GFR has been less than 30, if the renal biopsy showed more than 30% glomerulosclerosis or fibrosis, this was an indication for a simultaneous liver and a kidney transplant. Now, mind you that these are patients who need a liver transplant and they are pulling a kidney out of the donor pool. 2012, the OPTN criteria came in and who classified that patients with CKD, if they are on dialysis or if the GFR is less than 30 ml per minute, or if there is proteinuria more than 3 grams, they would benefit from an SLKT. The most recent guidelines which have come up is the OPTN policy updated in 2017. And what they have defined that at the time of listing, these patients who have had a GFR of less than 60 ml for more than 3 months could be listed for a simultaneous liver and a kidney transplant. But at the time of transplant, where there could be a significant wait list for deceased donor liver transplant, their GFR has to be less than 30 ml for more than 6 weeks, or they should be on hemodialysis. And that is the group of patient who would qualify for a liver and a kidney transplant. Now, coming to this third group of patient, now this is the group of patient where the patient selection would be very important, in the sense that now acute kidney injury could be either HRS or ATN. I'll just go to the next slide for a second. So the acute kidney injury could be HRS or ATN, and you can see that HRS could be reversible in a lot of patients. Whereas if there is ATN, this is the group of patients where we do not expect injury of or recovery of renal function even after a liver transplant. So even after the liver function improves, the kidney function is not going to improve. And these are the patients who would require a kidney transplant. So going back to the slide, that in terms of kidney injury, we are trying to look at the patient's reversibility, and if we think that there is reversibility, try to avoid a kidney transplant, because we are pulling a kidney from a diseased donor pool out in this situation. So initially, Davis in 2006, the criteria was that a dialysis duration of more than 6 weeks, or creatinine more than 2 milligrams per deciliter, and dialysis more than 8 weeks was selected. The most recent guidelines which have come up, the OPTN 2017, dialysis more than 6 weeks. So the assumption is that with dialysis or with a GFR of less than 25 for more than 6 weeks, it is unlikely that the native kidneys would recover even after a liver transplant. Okay, so that is kind of how we would select these patients. Now, intraoperative, what is important, that if these are the patients who are undergoing a simultaneous liver and a kidney transplant, liver transplant can proceed in the conventional way, which is cable transposition or a piggyback. Kidney transplantation, now some surgeons prefer to go the retroperitoneal approach, or some surgeons, because of the presence of portal hypertension, collaterals, where
Anurag,
yeah,
just hurry up.
Yeah, there's another 3 slides. So in the presence of retroperitoneal collaterals, it could be these, this. A continuous renal replacement therapy would be very important. Now, these are the outcomes of SLKT versus kidney transplant alone. So this is a group of patients who were listed for simultaneous liver and kidney transplant, but the second group received a liver alone and the first group received both. So you can see a dip in the survival, initial dip, which is related to the first 48 hours mortality, and then the survival curve continues to be low as compared to the SLKT patients. Now, optimization, which is reducing the number of kidneys getting pulled out, it could be kidney after a liver transplant, or an extended criteria kidney from deceased donor could be used in what is called as liver with double kidney transplant. If there were biomarkers which could differentiate between HRS and ATN, it would be very important. And this could be a futuristic approach where, with the help of biomarkers, we can differentiate between ATN because of HRS versus AKI, and give a kidney only when there is ATN. Coming to the last 2 slides, so this is a recent paper from 2021 in the ATC. This is a data of 30 kidney transplant recipients alone in patients with cirrhosis. Now, this Mind you that this is such a small number with a study period of more than 20 years from 4 centers. And what is important to understand is that 40% of these patients develop complications within 5 years of their kidney transplant alone. And hence again that
I'm sure we're really running late, Anurag. I think you should wind up, please.
I just the last word of caution, I would say group of chronic kidney disease without portal hypertension is selected for kidney transplant alone. Patients with portal hypertension would need a simultaneous liver and a kidney transplant.
We won't have time for
Thank you.
discussion at all. It is a very interesting topic, but you know we are really out of time, and you know there are many questions which crop up with this presentation, especially the numbers. You know whether we need to redefine some of these numbers for India. When you say less than 60 ml per GFR per minute in the chronic kidney disease, many of the patients in India don't have that kind of GFR. Normal people, because we do have small kidneys compared to the Western world. I don't think so. We have time though, Ajay. I'm sure there must be questions.